Hello, this is Tracy Shores, and I'm going to kind of continue a thought about patterns and what prompted me the other day to begin this journey as I saw my daughter uh, diligently prepare and with a servant's heart prepare this beautiful ice water for her sick brother and follow all the protocol. Keep her hands, washing her hands, not touching his stuff, making his ice water, putting the lid back on the top with his straw that he'd been using, who's getting sick earlier that day. And she proceeded to make that gorgeous ice water. And she said, "Oh, Mommy, I'll be careful. I won't touch anything." Well, then she actually made the ice water, carrying it to him, and she takes a big sip. And I looked at her and said, "Lillian," she actually turned and said, "Mom." And I said, "Oh, Lillian." I said, "That was like the whole point." And she's like, "Oh," she just, it was like, the water looked good, and she took a sip, and that's why I did that video the other day, just kind of encapsulating how the Lord brought to mind the story of Eve. And so, and how the tree looked. I think it just brought that scripture to mind, how the tree the fruit looked desirable to eat. And so, but I actually been chewing on it, and I had said that I thought about patterns earlier, a few weeks prior to that, and primarily because of a personal experience. And I live in town, and the train, we hear the train every day, multiple times a day. And after, on that day that we lost Michael, what I'm come to conclude is that the sound of the train, even though I don't remember it in the kind of the pain and agony and drama of that whole experience, I think I was, like on a subconscious level, that I was hearing that train, and that train represented that time was moving on. It was kind of like, it was sort of a record keeper for where one train passed, two train, that everything was changing. It was kind of like my new day one. And I even see that in the garden when we look at this story with Adam and Eve, where they had their original day one in the garden. Adam first and then Eve. But after this event, then we see day one, D-Day, of a new, that changes the course of history for them and for every person thereafter. And so I actually started to hate hearing the train, and I can't avoid hearing the train. I'm at the house, I hear the train all the time, and it kind of triggers these emotions in me. And I knew that that sound does create patterns. I had listened to a teaching years back that talked about how when they do different frequencies of sound, that they put sand like on a metal plate, and that sound creates patterns in the sand. Beautiful images in the sand, depending on the frequency. And so it was fascinating to me. And I thought to myself, as I shared the other day, what was going on in Eve's mind, that in a sense, it seems like her and Adam were taken down in like 6 verses. And so that when I looked at it more closely, it seemed surprising to me, because here they were in perfect fellowship with God and in the beauty of that garden and all perfection and with their maker. And so it seems that they had everything. They had it. And then this other story the Lord brought to mind didn't really seem related initially, but as I chewed on it more, I found an interesting kind of connector to the two stories. And that's the story of King Balak and him calling on, really like the sorcerer, cultural prophet Balaam, and him wanting him to come and curse Israel. And I'm not going to go through that whole story, but we are going to see something in relation to their purpose and their destiny, and what possibly caused them to get derailed. And so this other verse actually has kind of also come into the mix, and it was interesting because I don't know where, I often say a hope deferred makes the heart sick. But I don't know that I always connected the second part of that verse. It says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life, or a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. And so as I started looking at these two stories, and along with actually even just, I was listening to someone this morning, and a gentleman I like, and he was talking about a young girl, a teenage girl, who was struggling with kind of purpose depression, which I think is probably actually, it spoke to me personally, because after a serious tragedy, sometimes your purpose, it's like I can go from being like a wildfire to change the world for God to like purposeless. To searching for meaning just to get out of bed. And so it's crazy, the extremes. And so what he was saying, he was talking about this young girl and her struggling with like a purpose depression. And here her parents were billionaires. It was an Asian family and they were billionaires, and she had everything. And so that story also aligned with thinking of this experience in the garden, because indeed Adam and Eve seemingly had everything. I mean, God walked with them in the garden. It was perfect. And there was no death. I mean, which was another verse that came to mind. It says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." And I was thinking, in light of that, it's kind of like, you shall believe a lie and begin to die. And so, indeed, that is what happened in the garden. So, kind of wrapping this all together, and even like with the story with Balak and Balaam, it's interesting because we learn that Balaam, he did have some sort of ability, a supernatural ability, that was misused. And so he wasn't connected to the Father rightly, and God used him to bless Israel in that case, but he struggled with greed. And so I'm going to link that. Ultimately, what I kind of concluded is that so if it says a desire fulfilled is a tree of life, but when we have desires that are not in line with the Father's plan at that time, or even out of his timing, or just wrongly not centered on the love of God, those desires are not a tree of life. They're actually a tree of death. And so it says about Eve, not only did the tree look good, the fruit looked good, desired, but it says it actually it looked desirable for gaining wisdom. So she had this desire for gaining wisdom. And we know that that's spoken about much in the Bible, that really, those who, it's kind of aligned with seeking signs and wisdom and knowledge, and really leaving God over here, but desiring these truths apart from God. And so she did have that desire for that wisdom, and it seems that may have been a pattern in her life, that desire, she acted on it, because the devil is always looking, and that was another thing that came to mind. He's always looking for an opportune time. So he's studying you and your patterns. I mean, patterns are things that repeatedly happen. They're reoccurring things that, this equals this, and they repeat themselves. And so she did have this desire for gaining wisdom, and the devil approached her at an opportune time to basically present this to her. And so if you think about Balaam, he had this desire. He struggled with greed. So his gifting, because of that struggle with greed, could never be rightly used. And so truly, and actually really even light of that, like no desire, the apathy, that's a whole nother subject. But whether it's a wrong desire or no desire, those places form patterns in our lives where the enemy can more easily come in with a word that we'll agree with. Like in the case of Balaam, I mean, he was enticed, it seems, by the lure of money and reward. And so, and Eve was enticed by this, it seemed desirable for gaining this wisdom. And so it's just interesting. So I think what I even took away in my own life, and to be honest with you, I can struggle with both of those things. I love wisdom. I love knowledge. I love and I like studying God's word, because I like to know him and I want to love him. But as I look at my own life, sometimes where I got out of keel is where I was more interested in the information, and I became very zealous about the information than about the heart of God. And so, and I think that's always where we can get off track. And so, because I'm passionate for things, and so I pursue things with everything I have. And when I look at my family's history, we've done lots of different things. And I used to joke that my husband kept us, out of living in a commune because I was, I love the Acts Church. I love Hebraic roots. I loved homeschooling. I loved, sustainable living. Whatever I did, eating healthy, I always did, 10,000%. And so, and that's beautiful. But when there are things woven in that, desires that are not pure, then that can be a place where the enemy is like a playground for the enemy. And so I also wanted to point out that it seems to me that if Eve had actually been having some thoughts in her mind about wanting to have wisdom and understand things, she was right there in the garden with her father. And indeed, she if anyone, could have, she could have had a face-to-face conversation with the real deal and gotten answers. She could have even gone to him and said, Daddy, I don't understand. Why can't I eat from that tree? And so she had the opportunity to go to him, but she had a part of her, and some patterns possibly that had formed, where she entertained thoughts that she didn't bring to the Father. And could have that all been avoided if she brought those to the Father? And so I've talked about this before because he sees all of that anyway. And it's what I've been saying to my kids. I said, when we start to have these desires or thoughts that we know feel a little bit like we want to keep them hidden, it's really, we need to the Lord sees them. We need to bring them to the Father. And that can prevent a pattern in our life and say, Lord, I'm struggling with this. Maybe, I'm desiring this. I'm desiring that. And I know you have all want good things for me, but I need balance in this area. And I need to be waiting on you and asking for your timing and your blessing. Because I know that if I go after these desires apart from you, it will not be a tree of life. It will be a tree of death in my life. And it'll actually be, like the Hebrews verse says, you'll be a slave to the fear of dying. And so it's because it's that desire fulfilled, it is like a death tree, because once it's not attainable. It's like, beauty, and then it fades. Wealth, and then it's gone tomorrow. It's a relationship, and then that relationship's not what you expected it to be. And so it's just a constant treadmill to actually find that tree of life, when truly it's only found in connection and communion and purpose and oneness with the Father, which even kind of going back to Balaam, if he had brought his gifting to the Father, and God could, the Bible promises, right, if you bring it to me, won't I give you all things? And so we don't know what kind of lifestyle Balaam could have had if he just submitted his giftings to the Father. And the same thing with Eve. She had wisdom with her. She could have just asked the Father and had incredible wisdom and knowledge instead of going, sneaking around basically. And so which was the day one of that dying process. And so I hope this bless you. And again, this is not exhaustive. This is just me kind of exploring the scriptures with you. Hopefully you glean something. Hopefully it causes you to think on your own life, your own patterns, where you might be susceptible to believing a lie. And truly, I just want you to be blessed and to grow in God's love, because that's the most important thing, is that God's love never fails, that he loves you and that he'll never leave you or forsake you. And his love absolutely never, ever fails. So be of good cheer. Blessings. Bye-bye.